Hey everyone, this is Nick and welcome to your weekly Linux and open source news video. This time around we have Nvidia being bullied into making their drivers open source for all their GPUs, we have a potential new theme for Ubuntu 22.04, and we have the Steam Deck being released with a lot of reviews and my first impressions. Let's take a look. But if you don't want big companies to take a look at your data, you might be interested in installing this little browser extension. Thanks to Startpage for sponsoring this video. You might already have heard about Startpage as a search engine that uses Google results, but anonymizing them and removing every single point of data that Google could use to track you and your searches. But now they've launched a new extension called Startpage Privacy Protection. It's an extension for Chrome and Firefox, but you can also install it on any Chromium-based browser. What it does is simple. It will set your default search engine to Startpage, but you can still change that back if you prefer another private search engine. It will send do not track signals to all websites you visit. It will block any third-party tracking script. And it will replace all social media, video and music site tracking with click to activate controls. On top of that, it will display a privacy rating for each site, based on its behavior before everything was blocked. And it will also give you a complete privacy report to let you know what you blocked all throughout your browsing session. Oh, and if you're afraid that it's going to break some websites that you visit, you can tell the extension to let some cookies or some tracker scripts pass through the extension just so the website can work. If you want to try out that new extension, just follow the link in the description below. So, Nvidia suffered a big hack in the past weeks, with the hackers claiming to have access to 250 gigabytes of hardware-related information. The group already leaked source code for DLSS and information about Nvidia's future architecture for their GPUs, but they are now asking Nvidia to open source their drivers for Windows, macOS and Linux. They threaten to release all the data they have, including all the silicon chip files, which, while they would be unusable by any serious competitor if they didn't want to be sued, could still really screw up Nvidia for the foreseeable future. I'm all for having fully open source Nvidia drivers, but this isn't the way to go about it. Ubuntu released another point update to Ubuntu 20.04 with specific updates to the kernel and Mesa. They got bumped respectively to version 5.13 and version 21.2.6, which means that it's basically up to par in terms of hardware support with 21.10. It's just a minor update, but it's interesting, because people often tend to forget that Ubuntu does have more hardware made available through their hardware enablement program, which adds new kernels and new graphics drivers regularly to their LTS releases. So if you need stability on the latest hardware, it's still possible. Unfortunately, you're still stuck with GNOME 3.36 on that version of Ubuntu, so you're missing out on tons of performance improvements, features, bug fixes, new applications. Basically, don't use an LTS unless you really need stability. Speaking of Ubuntu LTS, let's talk about the next one, Ubuntu 22.04. This one will have a new theme that is very much based on Libadwaita with different colors, namely orange. It brings the all-important rounded corners on all four corners of each window, softer gray header bars, bigger border radius, and the nomination of orange as the only accent color you will get. The purple is gone. The Yaru icon theme also got some fixes, new symbolic glyphs to work with GNOME 42, and a new file manager icon which looks a lot better than the previous one. The shell theme is also more in line with the default one in GNOME, without the triangular arrows sticking out of pop-up menus, and aubergine being thoroughly erased. It's okay though, aubergine, what some people call eggplant, is a terrible vegetable. No one can stop the KDE devs from advancing on their updates, and this week is another good one. The 15-minute bug initiative has progressed with 3 new bugs fixed, including one that regards panel positions on multi-monitor setups, and a crash on Wayland on multi-monitor setups as well. New features that will come to KDE Gear 22.04 or Plasma 5.25 include the ability to share scanned documents from the scanning app, ScanPage. There's new generic avatar images for your user accounts, and a bunch of new search queries being added to KRunner, including ProtonDB, WineHQ, the Flatpak documentation, or Ubuntu packages. As always, that's accompanied by plenty of bug fixes and UX improvements that we shouldn't have to wait much longer to play with. The Linux kernel is mostly written in C, but what you might not know is that the Linux kernel is written in the equivalent of Shakespearean English of C. It uses version C89, which dates from, you guessed it, 1989. It's not really an issue of compatibility, since it can still be compiled without issues with a more modern compiler using the C11 standard from 2011. But it seems that using the C89 standard creates some convoluted code practices that wouldn't be necessary with more modern standards. So Linus Torvalds has decided that the kernel would move to the C11 version for the kernel 5.18 merge window. Of course, depending on the issues it might create, this could get pushed back because it's not a majorly important transition, it just needed to be mentioned. Back when Microsoft unveiled GitHub Copilot, there was some uproar about how ethical it was to use open source code to train an AI that writes code, even for non-open source projects. The Free Software Foundation had called for papers that they would fund to explore GitHub Copilot in detail, and these papers are now here. There are 5 of them, not ranked in any particular order, from various professors, PhD candidates, or fellows at various universities. They all seem to explore the copyright aspect of GitHub Copilot, and while I haven't read them yet, they are all in PDF form on my tablet because that's a topic that really interests me. Everyone knows Linux Mint is based on Ubuntu, but did you know it also had a version based on Debian? LMDE5 for Linux Mint Debian Edition. It saw a new beta release based on Debian Bullseye. Of course, apart from the base itself and the library and kernel versions, there's no actual user-facing difference between the usual Ubuntu-based Mint and this one. It's more useful to actually test how Mint will behave when it's rebased on the next LTS release of Ubuntu 22.04. I also can't help but think that since Ubuntu and Linux Mint don't really seem to see eye to eye these days on most topics, maybe LMDE could become the default Linux Mint version in the future. Getting Things GNOME 0.6 is now released. If you don't know about it, it's a wonderful app that lets you handle all your tasks and projects following the Getting Things Done methodology. Not only does the new release fix bugs, but it also brings a whole new CalDAV backend, so you can sync your tasks to any Nextcloud server, Google Tasks, or anything else that relies on that open protocol. There's also a new gamification plugin to let you get a few milestones and rewards to get you to actually do your work instead of just logging it into GTG. The tag editor has been revamped and is now a lot more streamlined, and the app got way better error reporting. The CalDAV feature is enough for me to want to give it another go and maybe try and replace Planner with it. I could use my Nextcloud tasks as the backend, it would be cool. A new interesting Linux-based operating system showed its pretty face this week, Dahlia OS. It's an interesting one as it lets you pick between a version that runs the Linux kernel and another one that runs the Fuchsia kernel, that new kernel developed by Google that we have yet to see used in anything really. It comes with a custom desktop environment called Pangolin and its own window manager called Utopia. Pangolin is actually built with Flutter, just like the default apps, and to run something that's not Flutter-based, you'll have to resort to Dahlia OS containers. It looks weird and quirky, and I don't really know who it's for, but since it's not just another distro that's a rerun of GNOME, it deserved a mention. The Steam Deck embargo has been lifted, and people who were the fastest to pre-order might already have been sent theirs. I got one this week, so expect my review in a few days. Actually on Sunday. In the meantime, other people seem to think it's fantastic hardware running flawed software, which is always better than the opposite since you can't fix hardware with over-the-air updates. The deck now has more than 900 games marked as certified or playable, and that's a fantastic size for a launch library. Personally, I published some first impressions on my Linux Shorts channel, the link is in the description, and I found it amazing, although the battery life isn't great. Seriously, subscribe to the Linux Shorts channel, I left a link in the description. I post 3 to 4 videos a week there with the major Linux news. And honestly, just because the format is different doesn't mean you have to hate it. Try it out, give it a chance. Gabe Newell, the CEO of Valve, talked to IGN about the Steam Deck, and there were some interesting tidbits to be grabbed from that. First, they want it to be a permanent extension of PC gaming, as in something that gamers know exists and that developers plan for. Gabe also says that demand for the deck has been high, higher than anticipated, and that shortages might increase, which means that if you did not pre-order yet, you're not getting closer to getting one. He thinks pricing will stay the same, but as most people bought the most expensive version, they might still want to see what higher-end models could look like. Finally, there will be other versions of the deck in the future. So maybe now I'll get my chance to have Gabe knock on my door to deliver my Steam Deck Pro 2 OLED model in the future. Need more Steam Deck news? Collabora detailed a bit of the inner workings of SteamOS 3, the OS running on the Steam Deck. While it's not yet available to everyone for installing on their favorite PCs and turn them into gaming consoles, it's still interesting to see how it was tweaked from its arch base, and since Collabora worked on seamless system updates with Valve, they have a few details. Basically, SteamOS has two system partitions that have two different versions of SteamOS. When you update, a new system image is written to the currently unused partition, and then the system is rebooted. The bootloader selects the newer OS and starts that, and if booting fails, the bootloader reboots on the older version of the OS that is still there. Clever and simple. I like it, although this is probably not how SteamOS 3 will work on computers when you can user install it on your own hardware. On that note, Valve also released the Steam Deck system images, so you can restore your deck, but you can't use those to install on any other system. For masochists, Elden Ring is now out, and it's been immediately validated for the Steam Deck, and so it can also run on your Linux gaming PC. If you want to play a game in which George R.R. Martin wrote a few snippets of text, and you like to suffer in boss fights, then you can use Proton Experimental on Steam to run that game. There seem to be some quirks with the anti-cheat program, but it's being worked on. Also, if you prefer multiplayer shooters, Apex Legends now works on Linux as well, although there has been no official support announcement, so play it at your own peril. And because not everything can always be roses and rainbows, Bungie just announced that there would be no Steam Deck compatibility for Destiny 2, and that people who try to brute force it would get banned. This is especially egregious, because Destiny 2 already has a Linux version that runs on Stadia. It uses BattlEye as anti-cheat, which does have Proton support, and it could already run with Proton if anti-cheat didn't act up. So basically, Bungie is saying to Destiny 2 players that they'd rather have them not play on their currently owned devices or on their new Steam Deck than to send an email to BattlEye to enable Proton support. Classy. The Heroic Games launcher keeps improving. Not only can it support Epic Games with all the options you would expect, Proton versioning, access to the store to download all games, updates and DLCs, but it now also handles GOG. It uses the Galaxy API for the Windows and macOS version, and on Linux it lets you use the offline installers that developers provide. You can also install DLC or even run the native Linux games using the Steam runtime to avoid dependency errors and choose language. Heroic isn't available as a Flatpak just yet, which means it doesn't run on the Steam Deck just yet, but I have good hopes we might see that in the future. And finally, another news video, another Wine update, as Wine 7.3 was released. This one brings more cleanups to support the new long variable type, there's now proper support for API sets, and more DLLs are being converted to the PE format, because apparently some had escaped that conversion work. HID joysticks also got a bunch of fixes, just like there were 15 bugs that were tackled, including for games such as Black and White 2, Motocross Madness 2, or Grey Matter. Of course, it shouldn't be long before we see these improvements land into Proton, just like you could land a sweet Linux laptop. Slimbook is the sponsor of this video. They make Linux devices from Valencia, Spain. They ship worldwide, they have all keyboard layouts, and they make devices for virtually every price point. For example, the Slimbook Essential, which is their entry-level laptop. It's got a great keyboard, good screen, good battery life, good performance, and great build quality. If you need a new Linux laptop, check out the link in the description below and get your Slimbook right now. They're really good. So thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, to write a comment. And if you didn't like it, you can also dislike and tell me why in the comments. If you want to help me make more of these Linux news videos, you can also join my Patreon subscribers and my YouTube members. Both get access to a weekly Patreon cast and the right to vote on the next topics I'll cover. So thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!